regarding the artistic project of constructing walls. To photograph is to map. To view a photograph, one has to decipher the encoded terrain. I look at photographs, still and moving images of my homeland, trying through them to retrace the shifting forces, molding and shaping its surface. I'm here to conduct a small-scale research. Some say that photography is a tool of social research. Some have said earlier that the realizing power of photography could be used to give an objective and tangible sense of validation to faith and scriptures. Corroborate the biblical story by geolocating it and giving it a tangibility which it formerly lacked. But it is not really a matter anymore of revalidating faith itself through the presentation of the surface appearance of things, but rather the act of shaping the surface, excavating and constructing, as active realization of an embodied and embedded redemptive process. I do not profess, on this small scale, to do more than give its general character, but the point of view was carefully selected at an angle which enables to explain much of the topography of the city. It starts with a point, fixed, a product of haptic creation. As the first pulse of a light leaves the emitter, hits the physical surface in front of it, millions of beams follow, systematically mapping out all that is within the scanner's range. For every beam a digital point, autonomous yet connected, time-stamped and geotagged. There is a combined sense of dry data and otherworldliness, a translucency and hyperreality in this granular realism. As early as the 1840s, photography alongside archaeology has been a tool in the service of religious attempts to reconstruct, revive, give visual form and tangible presence to the heavenly. In contrast to their pilgrim and colonial predecessors, Israeli biblical archaeologists had national rather than religious aspirations. Excavations were often carried out by secularists, men who saw the biblical as a historical national text that could fuse the relationship of a national identity to its state. Yet as the decades moved on, the pilgrims' viewpoint gave way, not only to a secular but increasingly to a messianic nationalist view, working to close the gap between image fantasy and facts on the ground.
The archaeology itself speaks. This is not just a stone. This wall is not just a wall. I'm not touching just a stone here. I'm touching a stone and I can feel the chisel made by the Canaanites as they made the stone. I feel King David's hand as I put my hand on the stone.
Across the Green Line, on the eastern mountains of the West Bank, outside Jerusalem, all the way down to Hebron and the large quarry in Yatta, Jerusalem stone is cut and prepared for delivery to the capital. This cladding of stone is a visual symbolic mark of inclusion into the jurisdiction of the holy ancient mountain city. on the hills of Sebastia, similar to the flashlight in pitch dark, only that which is lit registers. That which is obscured remains blacked out, void. In the process of spatial analysis, the original physical surface, which was flattened onto the planar photographic material, has some of its volume reconstructed. It is stripped of its iconographic, pictorial and sentimental trappings, making way for a different type of aesthetics. It brings forward the aesthetics of the mechanics of capture, a digital embodiment of the transcoding of an existing terrain onto a three-dimensional grid. The photographic archive, repurposed, can be grasped not as embalmed time but as encapsulated space. Viewing one photographic apparatus through another could then be understood, also, as a forensic reconstruction of the method of spatial deformation performed by the act of original capture. The surface is always experienced as the present. We excavate the ground in order to bring the archaeological remains to our present and re-stratify through the photographic surface is the great leveling field, on which we unload and burden with our plans and desires. Is the point cloud photograph a documentary sculpture? Could it be, as Jeff Wall describes, a depiction which constitutes an object? Could our modern state continuously and practically materialize without the photograph? The question of materiality re-emerges in a different way. As witness makes way to forensics and we enter the political apparatus of calculation, we can see that photographic space itself is becoming calculable. The materiality of the photograph changes, by definition constructing a photograph which registers only that which can be clearly calculated, that which cannot is left as void. Whereas for the pilgrims, the ruins verified the prophecy of the deserted Zion. For the present-day Messianic right-wing, construction and terraforming is a validating act of return. A reconfigured earth more than a reconfigured eye, photography as architectural space, the spatial photograph in its calculable, parametric nature is now part of the actual production. The spatial photograph, just as much as the home, the road or the archaeological site, is a form of settlement.
There is not the slightest doubt that we will have a say and an uncompromising say in Israel, which will annex the territories, the West Bank, Gaza, make them part of the state of Israel, and begin the process of moving the Arabs out. The future is ours.
I watch this man. Listen, read his repetitive statements, gain power through repetition. His disciples rampaging across the country, in growing numbers, heralding his arrival to center stage. We are spiraling down. Do not think that one has to be sad in order to be militant, even though the thing one is fighting is abominable. It is the connection of desire to reality, and not its retreat into the forms of representation, that possesses revolutionary force. Believe that what is productive is not sedentary but nomadic. Is this productive? On Bible Hill, a ruined concrete and stone structure. I photograph the stones, the terrain. A photographic point cloud creates a photographic topography. Photography as architectural space. Examining this thin surface layer, its thickness is that of a computational point. The solid coherence of the still photograph does not sustain itself here. Nor does the false perception of substance laying below that which is represented by the photographic surface. So much has and still is, thrown so to speak, laid and burdened on top of this still and mute registration of returning light. In Zionism, it could be said that secularization itself actually meant the nationalization of religious messianic conceptions and not their replacement. God was excluded from the discourse, yet divine promise continued to direct political activity, and to serve as a source of legitimacy. This legitimacy, though, remained separate from the material properties of the land. With the gradual rise to prominence of messianic conceptions within the realm of political, military, and municipal influence, this legitimacy becomes inseparable from material. Messianism is no longer to be seen as the antithesis of concrete reality. It is no longer merely a critique of what is, nor is it addressed only to the future. Rather, messianic redemption springs from present events. It is embodied and realized in them. Everyday physical reality is imbued, infused with the symbolic. There is a kind of conflicting distant intimacy in the act of stepping into the point cloud and approaching the thin layer of ground, examining its point of contact with the shell of a place and a person long gone.